Hey folks, we are live. I'm going to show or work on this Stripe sample for accepting a card payment. We built this sample a long time ago, looks like about 13 months ago, and we never added a .NET server example. So I'm going to go add in a server written in .NET. We're going to use .NET MVC today. Yeah, that's kind of the plan for today. We've got about an hour, so we'll kind of hack on that for a bit. Also, tomorrow we are going to be broadcasting live from the Stripe developers channel a really fun demo where we built an integration with Next.js, GraphCMS, and Stripe checkout. So tomorrow, yeah, if you wanted to drop in and check that out, that should be really fun. So today we're going to work on accepting a payment here. So this is the Stripe sample where you can accept a card payment. We actually have 3 different integration types. I noticed there's some vulnerabilities, so we're going to have to address those, but there's 3 different integration types. We have decline on card authentication, we have using webhooks, and we have without webhooks. So the example without webhooks is actually a way to confirm payment intents server side without actually presenting any modals or anything client side. So the way that it works is we first create a payment intent, and then we attempt to pay that payment intent on the server. So it looks like, I'm just like kind of reviewing the Ruby version here, where we have like a simple get route that's going to return some index.html. We've got a method here to calculate the order amount. We have a pay method. And then we are creating so our pay method is like dual purpose here. So if we got a payment method ID, then we are going to create a brand new payment intent and attempt to confirm it server side. So we're doing a manual confirmation on the server. Generally, this confirmation step happens on the client. You call stripe.confirm card payment on the client, and that will maybe open a modal or present some UI that you can then use to confirm the payment on the client side. But when we're doing it server side, we want to use the manual confirmation method, pass in confirm true. This will attempt to confirm the payment intent. And then if this flag here allows our mobile clients like Stripe iOS and Stripe Android to pass in use Stripe SDK, which is another argument that will allow confirmation with the SDK. Otherwise, if we're not receiving a payment method ID, but we're instead receiving a payment intent ID to this pay endpoint, to /pay, then we're going to try to confirm the payment intent client side. And then no matter what, we're going to generate a response that has the intent. And that response is going to be something like this. And we'll return that back to the client. Notice that we don't have any webhook handling here. In most implementations of payment intents, you have to have a webhook handler to deal with the successful confirmation of a payment intent. That's just like the default flow. But you don't have to use a webhook. Instead, you can do this server-side confirmation. So we kind of like attempt to create and confirm. But if there's any next action, so if the bank needs you to like enter a one-time PIN, or if you have to be redirected to a bank page or something like that, then we're going to fall back and confirm with the payment intent ID as like a second step. So when we're generating the response, we're going to say like, if the intent requires action, require source action was in an older API version. We'll add support for that too. If it requires action, then we're going to send back that it requires action, the payment intent, and the client secret. If it requires a payment method, then we're going to return with that it was denied, because if we attempt to confirm it server side and it requires a payment method, it means that we were just not able to use that payment method at all. And so we need to collect new card details from the user. Otherwise, it succeeded, and then we'll just pass its client secret to the front end. Okay, so we're basically just going to re-implement this Ruby server in .NET using .NET MVC. So I'm going to start from, let's see, what do I want to do here? Yeah, let's clone this accept a card payment repository. Okay, and then inside of here, without webhooks, I'm going to, I'm going to use Stripe CLI. So Stripe samples create developer office hours. So I'm just going to pull down the developer office hours base for .NET. That way we have some of the code already written for us. I'm going to move developer office hours server into a new directory called .NET. So, okay. All right, so in our .NET directory here, we have our solution. Let's just poke around in here and see what we've got going on to start. Okay, so we are loading .env, and this looks like it is almost populated. In fact, yeah, this looks good. Okay. And then we have some app settings. What am I looking for? Launch settings. So these tell us where we're going to start. We do want to start on localhost 4242. And then in startup, we don't have, okay. So let's just launch this. .NET run program.cs. And that should start up a, yeah, okay, so that started up a new server on localhost 4242. This is not what it looks like. Let's see. Okay. So the static directory should be up and over one because we are, when we install a Stripe sample from get clone, the client directory is going to be different than if we install it with the Stripe CLI. So I actually need to confirm where, okay, so client, it's actually in client web. So in our .NET.env, we actually want to go up and over from client to web. Okay, so .NET run program, restart our server and see if we can get this working again. So if we come back over here, refresh the page, hard refresh. All right, so this looks closer to what we're looking for. Okay, cool. So Stripe key, some stuff is failing. This is okay. All right, so let's hack around here. So in our controller, in our payments controller, we do not need a webhook. So we're going to delete the webhook endpoint. We are still going to initialize a client, but we do need to start adding some other endpoints. So why don't we refer directly to this Ruby example here. And in fact, what I think I want to do is write a test where we can assert that this Ruby server is starting up and running and returning what we expect when we hit these endpoints. In other samples, we're using config here instead of Stripe key, so that's a little odd. But okay, so yeah, let's do that. Let's start with some tests. So actually, rspec init, and then spec without webhooks spec.rb. Respect.describe, it works. It okay, and then our spec helper, we generally add some just like some random stuff here. Not random, but we've just recently started actually writing tests, and I want to make sure that we're following sort of the same pattern. So in our spec helper at the bottom, we have kind of these helpful methods, which will load our .env, set our API key, server URL. This for the .NET folks, sorry, this is like we're starting off here with some Ruby. To be false, but right now we're just writing we're going to write an automated test that will make sure that our server is running as expected. Okay. What else is required here? Yeah, let's just grab all these. Okay, cool. Got a failing test. And what are some examples of tests that we've written? Yeah, so okay. I think we want this to be, so if we go into without webhooks, bundle install. So we're going to run the Ruby server first, just to like get that up and running. Okay. And we don't need that. All right, so that's configuring our .env file. The .env is where we're storing environment variables. I know in .NET there's like a separate secrets thing, but we're not using that yet. Okay. So what is this called again in the sample? In the sample, this is called stripe key. And we expect it to have publishable key. And let's see if that works. Okay, great. So that's this is making requests to our locally running Ruby server. So we're going to try to get the tests passing against the Ruby server that's already written. And then we will rewrite, or then we'll be able to more quickly iterate and write our server in .NET. So we've tested this endpoint here and this endpoint here. The next thing we need to do is test this post request endpoint for /pay. So we need to say, let me refer again back over here to this. Okay, so we get the response and the status code when we say post JSON. So in this case, we want to pass pay. In the very first one we're going to do is it creates a payment intent. And we call pay. The reason that we generally put these all in the same spot is that if there are API requests that we need to depend on for future API requests, then it's nice to have them all in one place. But I think because of the way this is set up, I think we can actually use like reasonable it blocks here. So it fetches root index page as expected. It fetches index page. It fetches config. I guess it's not really fetches. Creates payment intent. It's like it serves config, serves the index page. Okay. So that route works. That route works. And then this route is going to fail because we don't have the right params yet. Okay. So we're going to make a post request to /pay. And the Ruby server is expecting what? So it's receiving some JSON. And the very first thing it does is tries to calculate the order amount based on data items. So I don't like right now, this calculate order amount is taking in items, but it's not actually doing anything with the items. So we can pass just like an empty list there to kind of fake that out. It's also expecting the currency, the payment method ID, and use Stripe SDK. So if I pass currency as USD, payment method ID as PM card Visa. This is one of our test cards, test payment methods, and that should work fine. Okay, so then that should create the payment intent because we're passing payment method ID. It should generate a response, and we should get something back. So our response should be a 200. And expect that resp to have key. What is it going to have? In this case, it should have succeeded. The payment intent should have succeeded. So it should only have the key client secret. Should not have requires action for this specific payment method ID. So if we run this again, posting to /pay. Okay, cool. We got back what we expected. Creates a successful payment intent PM card Visa. All right, let's pass a card that requires action. A requires action payment intent. So if we go to the testing page for payment methods, it's kind of hard to read. Make that a little bigger. So if you go down to the regulatory test cards, there's a couple cards here that will trigger like sort of the secure customer authentication flows or the 3DS flows. So we could use the card number directly, but rather than having to like go through and create a payment method, which generally happens on the front end with Stripe.js and tokenizing that, instead what we can do is we can use these payment method IDs, these test tokens. So PM card authentication required on setup. This is going to this should require authentication, and we should get a payment intent back that requires action. So if we pass that payment method, then we should receive this back because our payment intent should be in one of these two states, depending on our API version. And requires action should be true. So expected to have key requires action and payment intent ID and client secret, and expect resp requires action to be true. Okay. So let's run that. All right, so let's run them all. Cool. All right, so that looks like it's actually working great. What other states do we need to get to? Requires payment method. The card was not properly authenticated. New payment method required. So I am forgetting how we get into that state. It might be this card. Let's try. Requires payment method. So that should have different result, I believe. Nope. Okay. So that might be one of the cases where we pass in the payment intent ID. So what we want to do for this case is I think we want to take this payment intent. From the payment intent after handling authentication on the client, right? So, okay. So actually, yeah, this is actually a little different than I expected. So we do still handle authentication on the client. We're just confirming server side without webhooks, but we're not actually handling the next actions on the server. So this is a little different than I expected, but we're still confirming server side. So, okay. So let's go check out what, I think, yeah. So if we, I'm trying to think about how we might test this other use case. Confirms payment intent. So, okay. So what we want to do is we want to create a payment intent. Which we're going to do directly through the API. We're going to pass an amount and a currency. And then what we're going to do is update the payment intent to have a payment method. So this is what would happen on the server. Actually, yeah, let's see. Yeah, let's do that. And then instead of passing in items or currency, we just want to pass payment intent ID is equal to PI.ID. But we need to update payment intent.update. Payment method is going to be PM card Visa. So we assume this happens on the client. And then when we pass in the payment intent ID to pay, we should get a confirmed payment intent back. And it should not have any of this. It should just have like the success case, I believe. So this should just be this client secret. Okay, your no A key. Okay, yeah, let's see. So spec helper. Did we? Oh, we probably need a .env also out here. All right, we got passing tests. That's cool. So then if we go back into the spec file and we change this to attempt to confirm with a PM card authentication required on setup, what do we get back? Okay, requires action true. Okay, so we still get the requires action stuff back. Okay, so that's not actually entering our failure case either. So I think this is a pretty good starting point for our test suite. So let's kill our Ruby server and then go to .NET and Ruby, no, .NET run pro, actually, yeah. We want to open up our payments controller and we need to first add a method for Stripe key. So this is going to be, where did it go? Nope, that's not it. stripe key. Yes. So how are we doing this in checkout? We just want to add a simple GET request. And it looks something like this. But our response is just going to be the publishable key. So we need to go to our models and add a new model, public key response. Sure. How about a stripe key response? Okay. Stripe key response. And we'll see what we get. First of all, we should be able to hit this page, and we do. Can. And so that test should pass. It does. Now, does this pass? It does not, because what did we get back? We got back publishable underscore key. So in our public key response, if we use JSON property, I think, publishable key, import or using newtonsoft.json. Does that work? We might need to crack open Visual Studio to actually get this working here. Let's see. Oh, nice. Okay, so that's passing. There should be no pay endpoint yet, so let's go add that. So in our payments controller, now this is going to be a post endpoint, HTTP post to pay, and it's going to be a public async, maybe public task pay response or iAction result. No, pay response. And this is going to be the pay method, and it's going to say from body pay request. And we got to figure out what goes in here. So in our models, we need to add a pay request.cs and a pay response.cs. And our pay request is, I believe, yeah, let's just copy. So our pay request. What can we take in again? Let's see. For pay, we expect items as a list of something. I don't know, string, maybe? And I guess I'm going to have to say using system.collection.generic. And what else do we want here? We want the currency. This is going to be currency. And we also want, I think, the payment method ID. I can't remember if the C# convention is capital D or lowercase d there, but that should be fine. All right, so if I recall correctly, So we've got items. Or wait, this is the wrong server. Without server, Ruby server. Okay, items, payment method ID, currency, payment method type. Use Stripe SDK. Use Stripe SDK. All right, so I think that's it, right? Yeah, okay. So we've got our request params. Those, I believe, should be bound from the body when we receive this payment request. Just check and make sure it's from body. Yep, okay. But I need to name it. So I've given it a type. The type is pay request. That is this class here. So we're creating this model binding so that we can pass stuff in our request. And I don't know. I think this is going to fail because this task is not actually returning anything. I think I need to make this maybe async. Yeah. And this one is just returning an iAction result, which I think is okay. Yeah, so let's do that. For now, I'm just going to return okay, just so we can get it showing us something. And then I'm going to start the server again, and we can run our tests. Okay, crashed. Good. The namespace already contains a definition for Stripe key response. Right, because I didn't change this. Hey response. Hey response. We're going to come back and make that pretty and update it with what we expect to be returned to us. Collection. System.collection.generic. What is this? Collections? Is that it? System.collections.generic. Hey, it seems like that worked. All right. So let's run our test. And I think that may have worked. It didn't do anything, but it didn't crash too hard. Okay, so at least we're building or we're compiling. All right, so in our response, we have this generate response. Sometimes we return requires action. Sometimes we return payment intent ID, client secret, error. All right, so those are the four possible things: requires action, payment intent ID, client secret, or error. So we need a public client secret is going to be a string, client secret. And it's going to look like this. Okay. What else do we've got here? We have a payment intent ID that will also be a string. Oops. We have requires action. Which is a Boolean. Optional. And we have error, which is a string. Okay. I think this is technically like optional bool, but I don't remember if that's needed for our response stuff or not. So let's just start with this and then see how things go. So we're going to go back to our payments controller, and then because in our other examples we have separate methods for generate response. Let's make a private method here called generate response, which will return a pay response. And it's going to take in a payment intent. And yeah, I'm just going to copy the logic from here. And we will convert it from Ruby to C#. So switch, it's a switch statement, payment intent dot status. And I need to look up how to do a switch in C#. C# switch statement. Cool. Switch case colon statement break. Switch case requires, no. Can I do comma? Oh, they're just multiple fall through like this, I think. And right. Okay. And if that happens, we want to return a new payment, our new pay response with this stuff. And it's going to be like requires action true. What else is it going to be? Payment intent ID is equal to payment intent dot ID. It's going to be client secret is equal to payment intent dot client secret. And okay, I think that gets us this thing, at least. All right. So we need a couple more case statements and another payment response. And the next one is just going to return error. And that equals your card was denied. Please. All right. And that is in the case of requires payment method and requires source, the older requires source. Okay, and then finally, if it succeeds, then we want to pass back the client secret. Okay. And I guess we should make some other case where if it default, is there default? Yeah, default. Return new pay response where we have an error. And the error is like unknown payment intent status. And maybe we can put the status in there where we just say like payment intent dot status. We're switching on the status. If we don't break into one of these, we'll just return the status as part of that error. I think that should be good. So let's say we want to actually, like, I think we're at a point where order amount, calculate order amount. This kind of bothers me a little bit, because we are calculating the order amount, which is an integer value, but we're just returning 1400 and expecting that you'll kind of like fill that in. So let's say, let's name it all. We'll name it the same stuff. Calculate order amount. Calculate order amount. And I think this is expecting items, but I don't think we have defined what types those items are. Object. Object. Okay. What about in Go? What do we do in Go? We have no Go. Sweet. How about TypeScript? Items. List of object. All right. So in C#, why don't we just make it like list of any, maybe? Yeah, I guess we have to change our pay request to make this, our pay request to make it a list of any object hash. Yeah, what do we want to do here? Object, like generic object type, Newton soft JSON. Yeah. I don't like it. List of object. Okay, what is it? What is it being passed from the front end? Let's take a look at the client. From the front end in web, items is a list of object, has ID. Okay. So, yeah. So this should deserialize into another object type, if we're following the convention. But that object type, I think, has to be defined in C# so that we can deserialize a payment request as successful. Oh, this is not fun. Okay, so we don't specify the shape of the type for an item in the other languages, but I think we have to define it here. So let's say public class pay request item. And it has an ID. And this will be a list of pay request item. Then up here, I don't know if list of any is going to work, but let's just try it. Okay, so the first thing we do is we say order amount is equal to calculate order amount of rec.items. Okay, so that gives us our order amount. That's the same as this thing here. Then we have a try catch block where we are handling card error and just returning with an error message. So then we need a try catch block. And this is going to be card error. And it's returning, this is still returning a 200 in Ruby, which is not really what we want to do. But I don't want to make it different, so I'm going to stick with return OK. So if rec.PaymentIntentID, else if rec.payment, I think we want that as the second one actually. If there's a payment method, then we want to do stuff. Otherwise, if there's a payment intent, we want to confirm payment intent. If there's a payment method, we want to create payment intent. So here we want to say something like, let's just look up what this looks like in .NET. So creating a payment intent in .NET looks like that. Okay. So payment intent create options. Amount is order amount. Currency is rec.currency. Payment method types. We did not define in the old or in the existing sample. So payment method, rec.payment method ID. Confirmation method is equal to manual. Confirm is true. And then use Stripe SDK is equal to rec.use Stripe SDK. Let's go confirm this is even in stripe.net. So payment intent, create options, Stripe SDK. Cool. Use Stripe SDK. And it is a bool. It is an optional bool. So in our pay request, we can make that an optional bool, I think. I mean, seems like it should work. All right, so we got our payment intent service. We call create. This gives us back a payment intent. And then, yeah, okay. Otherwise, we have our payment intent service. And we want to call confirm. And we're just passing into confirm our rec.paymentIntentID. Okay, and then in both cases, we want to take that intent. So let's say payment intent, or just intent up here, and then we're going to set it down here. Let's actually initialize our service up here too. And then we don't need to create that both times. And return generate response for intent. I don't know. Do we think it's going to work? Okay. Generate response for intent. Because it needs to return an iAction result. And that I actually wanted to like try making this async await. I think we can do await. There. We're returning an async task of iAction result. So I think we can await those. Let's see what happens. Chances are high I messed something up. So line 96. Return new pay response. Comma. 63. Yeah, it doesn't like that any, does it? Pay request item. I don't like this. A list of pay request item. List of pay request item. I need to put this in its own thing. Pay request item.cs. Oh, no. No. It wasn't mad about that. It was mad about not knowing about a list from over here. Okay. I got to read the error better. Ooh, what in the world? Cannot implicitly convert type string to bool. Payment request. Use Stripe SDK. Is that the one it's talking about? All right, so on line 40 in our payments controller, line 40. Okay, so if this is not null, is that a thing? Is it going to be empty string? Okay, pay request does not contain a definition for use Stripe SDK. Pay request. Doesn't? Oh. Okay. Trying again. Fewer errors. That's good. Payment intent does not contain a definition for get a waiter and no accessible extension. Oh, right. Because this needs to be, okay. So create async and confirm async, I believe. Maybe. Cannot convert type string to bool on line 52. Oh, yep. Not sure if that's going to bring them in as empty string or like deserialize it as empty string. Okay. Use of unassigned local variable intent 56. Oh, come on. It's defined right here. Signed in the if block. Okay, fine. Getting warmer. Not all code paths return a value. I do now, I think. All right. We've got a few minutes here. I think we're going to start wrapping up as I have another call, but I had fun. Hope you had fun too. Undefined method HTTP body for unexpected token at blank. So I would open this up and I would open up the console to see if there's any errors. And I would click around in here to see if we can make this dance. Here's the submit function. Okay, we're preventing default. Let's step down into the pay function. change the loading state. Sure, whatever that does. We're going to create a payment method called card. And then we're not going to show an error because we don't have an error. We're going to set our order data to that payment method ID. And now we're going to make a post request and to/pay. Okay. And it failed there. It failed attempting to parse the result of pay. What was the response there? Let's see. Okay. Pay, go. Okay, let me see the pay response. Oh, come on. It had something, didn't it? Pay. Headers. I sent you a bunch of stuff, and I got nothing back. What's going on over here? In the pay function, console.writeLine in pay function. Order amount. Okay. All right, I'm going to leave it there. I will be back hacking around on this, and I'll try to wrap it up later. Hopefully that was somewhat useful. And yeah, thanks for hanging out. All right, yeah, I'm going to do the full wave. Come hang out tomorrow. We're going to do some cool stuff with Next.js, GraphCMS, and Stripe Checkout. All right.